So what I wanted to do is really go over some generational issues and give you a little bit of background information about some of those generations. And then it's kind of interesting about some of the concepts that you talked about specifically, so I'll jump in and try to comment. But can you imagine that right now, for the first time in history, we have 4 different generations in a workforce? So a baby boomer could be trying to have a one-on-one camaraderie-like conversation with a millennial who's really only had about a summer intern worth of job experience. Or perhaps a millennial is responsible for supervising somebody who came from the traditionalist generation. Or finally, Gen Xers are in the position of power now in organizations and making decisions about benefits that impact their baby boomer colleagues, for good or for bad. So it is true that we're shaped by our generations around us, and some people say shaped by our time more than our parents or our families. So I would just want to go through really quickly some of those generations. And you've probably heard about the traditionalists or possibly the World War II generation. And right now, those folks represent about 8% still of the workforce. So they're around. These are very conservative people in their actions and in their dress. The technology that kind of brought them along in their childhood was the radio. Everything was on the radio. If you want to communicate with these people, they tend to appreciate the written word. So memos or letters or, notes. The other one is baby boomers. And these folks were shaped actually because their parents kind of came out of the World War II generation, and Dr. Spock was a big deal and changed the way that people raised their kids. So they were raised really focusing on being optimistic, very can-do. In the workforce, these folks represent about 40% of the workforce right now still, even though, and they're probably going to remain longer due to the Great Recession. They're sticking around. And as you said, kind of some of the things they're going to do to change the concepts of retirement are huge. Phased retirement, kind of, or sticking around like most people will have to. These folks want to have an impact. They want to be involved in the decision. They have a voice. They've been told they have a voice, and they want you to hear their voice. Generation X is a little bit more skeptical. Imagine that these kids were raised during a place where Vietnam was going on. They saw Nixon fall from grace. They saw Jimmy Swaggart fall from grace, a variety of other kind of folks who were supposed to be in positions of power fell off that particular podium really quickly. Millennials were raised by what's called helicopter parents. I'm probably responsible for raising one of those. They are, since their parents were kind of soccer moms or helicopters, they're used to having conversations with adults and adult-like conversations. So imagine them at the workplace where they really want to come up and immediately be at a level playing field with you who's been working for 20 years. So they have a lot to give to the conversation. They want to be included in the conversation. Unfortunately, a lot of people above them feel like they need to serve their time, do the work, and then they'll be included in the conversation. So there's some challenges. If you want to get a hold of a millennial, you probably should text them. And I'm sure everybody knows that. You guys know how to text? Because if you don't, you're not talking to your kids. So what are some of the problems that we're facing kind of from a myth perspective? Well, I think the biggest one as it relates to the boomers and actually all participants is that we think that facts and fear motivate action, and they don't. All they do is increase stress. And while stress does allow us for a flight or fight situation, it doesn't really allow us to change our behavior over a long period of time. So one of the biggest concerns I have with some of the ways we're communicating with boomers in particular is we're shaking them down and telling them that they are all about a number. And a number is a challenging thing to kind of get your arms around, and raising your cortisol level does not raise your savings level. So I think that's one of the biggest things. The other part of it is we, in financial services, we spend a lot of money on branding and obviously building big brands, but boomers are likely not to stick around with brands just because they're a big brand. Kind of back to the fact that boomers want to be in on that particular decision. So there's lots of opportunities for advisors to build person-to-person brands with boomers and really make an impact. So Gen X, I'll let you read this in a minute, but I'll use myself as an example. I'm probably, from an engineering perspective, considered a baby boomer. I was born in 1961. I told Stieg. I was very excited when I got my AARP card because I'm so much of a geek. It's crazy. But kind of in reality, I'm a Gen Xer. And for Gen Xers, I think I'm not alone. I'm an individual in the sandwich generation, much like many of my peers. So we're faced with helping our parents. Myself, I help with my mom and my father. And then we have children that we've been helicoptering all along. And so we continue to do that way into their 30s, which is beyond my understanding, but it's true. The other part is because we're on this beginning phase of the 401k space, many of us don't have pension plans. I feel very grateful that I am part of the financial services industry, so I understood out of the gate that I was up a creek. But many of the Gen X kind of generation aren't very clear about that, or they're quite skeptical. Look at where they've kind of been raised. There was the dot bomb, then there was 2003, then there was 2008. As my sweetie pie said, it's like getting divorced all over again. Half of my savings are gone. So, it's true. So, and then kind of there's the issue around government subsidies and what's going on. So, boy, it's really, reality does bite for Gen Xers. Before I talk about millennials, I just wanted to let you read this headline. These are kids that really do crave acknowledgement, inclusion, community. They've been raised around soccer and ballet and basketball and, you know, from this activity to that activity. They're a part of a team, and they've also been rewarded on a regular basis. They graduated from kindergarten, they graduated from first grade, they graduated from 8th grade. Everybody kind of got an award. I want one of those. So millennials actually are very, very needy as it relates to communities. And Sarah Simoneau uses a term that I think is pretty interesting. Millennials also lead a curated life. They've been online since they were 5. They probably can teach you a little bit about SMS or text messaging. And we all know about millennials as it relates to the unemployment that they face, because boomers are sticking around, which kind of traps millennials in a job that is either going nowhere or no job at all. I have a young woman, very, very smart young woman, 24 years old, graduated with a degree in psychology. She's working part-time at Express. And I said, as an assignment, I'm trying to kind of mentor her a little bit. I said, I want you to go back to Express and ask them what it takes for you to get a 401k. And she said, well, that would be management, you know. Anyway, it's just very sad to me. She's very bright. So I've got my hands on an intern that I'm going to keep around for a while for a very low wage. Works for my business, but probably not for her. But what is interesting about the millennials is because they are trapped by not having a career, there are a large portion of them who said, screw it, I'll start my own thing. And they are. So 1 in 10 earns over $100,000 annually. Wow. And those kids have watched their parents and grandparents face retirement with a lot of fear. And many of them are very aware of their need to save. And it could be just because the helicopter parents are telling them, but I'll take it. They know they need to save. So the last generation that we didn't talk about, though, however, I do think needs to be addressed as it relates to financial services and what we can do, is Generation D, the digital generation. And that's more than 75 million people and a heck of a lot of assets. And if we just said, okay, we're going to focus right now on just that particular group of people and getting the word out, kind of like Transamerica has done with Twitter and whatnot, we could have a huge influence on that particular generation. And I put this up here too because as advisors, I want you to know this. I believe that advisors say, well, my clients aren't online. And I said, well, get a grip, because they are. So there's a huge opportunity to just even focus on this digital generation, the one that spans multiple age groups. I think, though, the opportunity for us is a really big opportunity. One of the things we know, though, is that people's relationship with their money is probably the most emotional that they have besides their spouse. There's so much baggage there, a lot of fear and doubt. And I do know, I mean, women, of course, many women are frightened of being a big lady. I mean, and shame. So what I feel like we really can do in financial services is that we need to change the conversation. And what I believe the conversation should do is change to one that's more emotionally based, one that's aspirational, one that gets rid of cortisol and gets into community and conversation and start kind of saying, okay, let's sit down, let's make a plan, let's be human, let's figure out how to talk with people about money where there's no shame and no doubt and not fear, but one that they can get their arms around. Because I really feel like we're not in a business relationship, we're in a personal relationship. I'm going to skip past this adult learning thing because you'll get these slides. If I can answer any of your questions about some of those adult learning concepts, I'll let you know. But I'll leave you with this particular kind of note. I love this. There's a book that's actually just come out, and it kind of speaks to a little bit about baby boomers and some of the things that they're doing, and actually connection that boomers have with their millennial counterparts, which is one around purpose. In fact, this new book is, the title of it, I believe, is The Purpose Economy. If we can get people to understand a vision of their future where they're able to redefine what it means to work, and perhaps give back to their communities, and have a plan that talks about their life instead of their money, I think that we could get people a little bit more engaged in the conversation of planning. So, in fact, that's why I left corporate America, is to create a life and not a job. And I don't think I'm alone with my Gen X or, baby boomer counterparts. Thanks.
Thanks, Sheri. Do you have any suggestions as advisors are out there working, presumably with all four generations? How do you do that? Because you talked about, sometimes a boomer trying to talk to a millennial. They have different languages almost sometimes. Are there any suggestions as to how they can kind of cross that bridge and make sure that they are having the conversations that are meaningful for that other generation?
Well, and I kind of feel like, and that's why I was kind of end with some recommendations on adult learning. I feel like anyone, when it comes to having a conversation, does business with people they know, like, and trust. And so I feel that the conversation should immediately move to a trust situation. And I believe that any particular generation is more likely to trust an individual who discloses more about themselves and the challenges that they face. So, as an example, we're working on some curriculum for some organizations, and the first piece of the puzzle is for the advisor to begin the enrollment meeting or the financial education meeting with a personal story about how they manage money or where they learned about money. And I think that any individual who would be sitting in a room when somebody self-discloses about their relationship with money or how they viewed money or how they learned about money is more likely to trust that particular individual. And then the other thing that we know, and everybody knows this, is that everybody wants to have a personal conversation with you about something very personal, which is their money. Kind of back to labels, I feel like the other problem we have is we know that Americans are drowning in debt, but nobody in a working world is going to sign up to go to a class called Managing Debt. Because that would be saying to their peer group, I'm screwed. And, they'd just be too much. So we try to change the words and say cash management, manage your cash before it manages your life, that type of stuff, so that we eliminate one of those big bad words.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think going back to your point about the jargon, I mean, that's true even when working with employers, right? So working at the employer level, speak English, right? I mean, they need to, they're trying to run a business. Dealing with the retirement plan is really secondary or maybe even further down the line. And it's not something that they're the expert in, which is why they've hired you, right? So I do believe that we have a question. Right
While he's walking up, I just want to say that fiduciary is not an innate term that Americans understand,
right.
or employers. And so when we help advisors try to tell their story, and they want to put on the front page of their website, "We are a fiduciary," I tell them that just says, "We are boring." So
it's about right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is this on? Yeah. So Nevin, in his presentation, showed how people are just not saving, right? They're not saving enough. You're talking about things we can do, but the number one reason why they're not saving, again, in Nevin's thing, is that they live day to day. They don't have any money. What do we do about that?
Well, so I'll just say one thing that I think is kind of interesting, which is I was a single mom for a very long time, and there was no way that anybody could tell me that I could extract money out of my paying for daycare with one paycheck and paying for rent with the other paycheck. And no matter how many times, helpful managers around me wanted to kind of bonk me on the head and tell me that, there was no way. So I do think that helping sweep the path by auto-enrolling people in a plan, because we know that very few people, once auto-enrolled, will opt out, and I think that's fantastic. The other day, and I honestly can't remember who I was talking to, but I thought this was rather brilliant. They did a Facebook situation, and they said that perhaps one of the ways that we could address the savings issue that we're facing as Americans is that your credit score actually looks at whether you're saving any money as well, which I thought was very kind of cool and interesting, because most people are tending to that credit score. And I honestly don't remember who that was, but I thought, well, wow, that would be an interesting way to wrap it back in.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. Hey, Nevin, that one should be on the list of, yeah.